Hi friends, it's Shuba. Welcome back to my channel and another day of Bookmas. 2025 is right around the corner and I cannot wait. New year, same me, more books. There are so many releases that have been on my radar, and I thought that I would share a video talking about the 25 books in 2025 that I want to read. These are going to be books that I am most anticipating and the books that I'm going to make sure that I read before the end of the year. We're going to get right into it. I have my laptop, I have my cup of coffee, and I have the list of books that I plan on reading in 2025. A lot of these books I don't really know much about, so I will be reading off of descriptions from the website. Let's get started. We're going to go by genres, and the first genre is romance. I have a big place in my heart for romance novels. I feel like 2024 is the year that I got into romance, and I cannot be stopped. This first book is Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. This book is coming out February 4th. The premise is Scarlett is swimming upstream. A junior at Stanford and a student athlete who specializes in platform diving, Scarlett prefers to keep her head down, concentrating on getting into med school and recovering from an injury that almost ended her career. She has no time for relationships, at least that's what she tells herself. I haven't read much sports romance except for Icebreaker and that whole series, Maple Hills series. I read 2 of them. I DNF'd the last book. So we're going to be dabbling into sports romance, apparently. Swim captain, world champion, all-around aquatics golden boy, Lucas, thrives on discipline. It's how he wins gold medals and breaks records. Complete focus with every stroke. On the surface, Lucas and Scarlett have nothing in common until a well-guarded secret slips out and everything changes. So they start an arrangement, and as pressure leads to the Olympics heats up, so does their relationship. It was supposed to be just a temporary, mutually satisfying fling, but when staying away from Lucas becomes impossible, Scarlett realizes that her heart might be treading into dangerous water. So we have sports romance. This has to do with swimming, but also some secret that Scarlett and Lucas kind of get involved with. I wonder if this is another paranormal romance, but maybe add a sports twist to it. I think that would be fun if maybe Scarlett was a mermaid. I don't know. We'll see. That's just what I'm gonna guess. It sounds interesting and I can't wait to read it. This next book is Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez, which comes out April 1st. Abby Jimenez is one of my favorite authors now, author by author, and I cannot wait for another book. The cover is also beautiful. There might be no such thing as a perfect guy, but Xavier comes disastrously close. A gorgeous veterinarian giving Greek god vibes, all while cuddling a tiny kitten? Immediately, yes. That is until Xavier opens his mouth and proves that even sculpted gods can say the absolute worst thing. Like, really wrong. Of course, there's nothing Samantha loves more than proving an asshole wrong. Unless, of course, he can admit he made a mistake, but after one incredible and seemingly endless date, possibly the best in living history, Samantha is forced to admit the truth that her family is in crisis and any good relationship would be impossible. Samantha begs Xavier to forget her, to remember their night together as a perfect moment, as crushing as they may be. Only no amount of distance or time is nearly enough to forget something between them. And the only thing better than one single perfect memory is to make a life and even a love worth remembering. Automatically love that our main male character is going to be a veterinarian and he loves animals. I love that. The cover even has a dog on it. I think that between our 2 main characters, Xavier is going to be more of that soft, loving main character, and then our main female character, I think she's going to have a little bit more of that edge with the secret that she's hiding. I think that with every Abby Jimenez book that you're going to get, it's going to be loving, but also so emotional and a tearjerker, so I'm mentally preparing myself for that. The next book is Wild and Wrangled by Lila Sage. This is the 4th book in the Rebel Blue Ranch series, which comes out on April 15th. I eat up every single one of Lila Sage's books in this series, and I cannot wait for this story. This one is going to be following Camille and Dusty, who are two supporting side characters that we follow briefly in each of the books. They just kind of pop up. So it'll be really great to get their own story, and I can't wait. It says, she's the one that got away. He's the one that never let go. Camille Ashwood has always loved a plan. Her latest was her best yet. She was going to get married so she could secure her daughter's future, get her overbearing parents off her back, and finally start building her own life in small town Meadowlark, Wyoming. Easy, right? But when her... spoilers, if you haven't read the third book yet, stop right here, carry on. I'll put the timestamp. I don't want to spoil anything for you at all. I'm going to continue now. But when her groom doesn't show up to the wedding, Cam's life is turned upside down. She doesn't even have a place to live. That is until she finds out the house she's loved since high school is available to rent. There's only one problem: the neighbor. Dusty Tucker has spent nearly all of his adult life running from what though? More like who? Cam Ashwood. But ever since he returned home last year, the girl who was his first, well, everything, has become a woman seemingly determined to keep him at arm's length. And he was okay with that. At least that's what he was telling himself. She was getting married after all. But now she's single and living next door. Dusty wants to show her that they can be friends, and that's that. I can't wait for this story. So there's going to be forced proximity. There's going to be going back to the basics of trying to just be friends. Just be friends. This is going to sound really, really good because I like Dusty as a main character. And I was always really intrigued by Cam because of her attachment to Gus. So this is going to be really good and I can't wait to read it. I'm smiling a lot. Also, I'm so glad I stopped that spoiler from happening. Please read all 3 books. They're really good. The next book is Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. This comes out on April 22nd. 2 writers compete for the chance to tell the larger-than-life story of a woman with more than a couple of plot twists up her sleeve in a dazzling and sweeping new novel. Alice Scott is an eternal optimist still dreaming of her big writing break. Hayden Anderson is a Pulitzer Prize-winning human thundercloud. And they're both on balmy Little Crescent Island for the same reason, to write the biography of a woman no one has ever seen in years, or at least to meet with the octogenarian who claims to be the Margaret Ives, tragic heiress, former tabloid princess, and the daughter of one of the most storied families of the 20th century. When Margaret invites them both for a 1-month trial period, after which she'll choose a person who'll tell her story, there are 3 things keeping Alice's head in the game. 1, Alice genuinely likes people, which means that people usually like Alice, and she has a whole month to win the legendary woman over. 2, she's ready for the job and has a chance to impress her perennially unimpressed family with a serious publication. 3, Hayden Anderson, who should have no reason to be concerned about losing his book, is glowering at her in a shaken to the core way that suggests he sees her as competition. But the problem is, Margaret is only giving each of them pieces of her story, pieces they can't swap to put together because of an NDA and an inconvenient yearning pulsing between them every time they're in the same room. And it's become abundantly clear that their story, just like the tale of Margaret, could be a mystery, tragedy, or a love ballad, depending on who's telling it. Ooh, this sounds really good. It's giving me beach read vibes with like that writing retreat type situation, but also there's a competition happening too, and I like that our characters are going to be butting heads and they're getting different pieces of Margaret's story. I hope we get both of their point of views. I am hoping for a dual point of view story, but I can't wait for another Emily Henry book. This next book is Out of the Woods by Hannah Bonham Young. I loved Out on a Limb. I read it in March while I was training for my half marathon, and it made my runs so much easier. I loved listening to the audiobook, and I can't wait for the point of views that we get in this story, because we get Sarah's point of view and Caleb's point of view. If you haven't read the first one, please go do, because this is kind of an interconnected standalone of their love story. It says, high school sweethearts, Sarah and Caleb Linwood have always been a sure thing. For the past 17 years, they have each had their own backs through all of the life's ups and downs, achievements, losses, stages, and phases. But Sarah has begun to wonder, who is she without her other half? When she decides to take a project on her own, a fundraising gala in memoriam of her late mother, Sarah wants nothing more than prove herself and to everyone else that she doesn't need Caleb to help her succeed. She's still her mother's daughter, after all, independent and capable. That is until an event fails and Caleb uninvitingly steps to save the day. The rift that follows unearths a decade of grievances between them, and doubts begin to grow. Are they truly the same people? Where when they got married at 19, are they supposed to be? In a desperate attempt to fix what they fear is near breaking, Sarah and Caleb make a spontaneous decision to join a grueling hiking trip intended to guide couples through rough patches, not practices. What follows is a life-affirming comedy of errors as the two nature-averse people fight their way out of the woods in order to find their way back to their roots. Ooh, this sounds like a really interesting contemporary romance. I cannot imagine finding your person at the age of 16 and growing older together, but also growing mentally and emotionally and physically, but also appreciating that you two are a team. And it's also important to be able to be yourself and have that individuality while you're still together as that team. I think this is going to be a really emotional story, and I think it's going to tug at the heartstrings for sure, and I can't wait. This next one is going to be oh so sweet. It is A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Sangu Mandana, which comes out April 29th. I loved A Secret Society for Irregular Witches, of Irregular Witches. I think it's of. And I can't wait to read this. An enchanting novel about a witch who has a second chance to get her magical powers and her life back on track. Sarah Swan was once the most powerful witches in Britain. Then she resurrected her great Aunt Jasmine from the ivory of the dead, lost most of her magic, befriended a semi-villainous talking fox, and was exiled from her magical guild. Now she helps Aunt Jasmine run an inn in Lancashire, where she deals with her quirky guest Shenanigans, who tries to keep the talking fox in check and longs for a magical future she lost. When she learns about an old spell book that could hold the secret to restoring her power, she finds herself turning to Luke, a gorgeous and icy historian, who might be the only person who can help her unlock the book's mysteries. Running an inn, reclaiming lost magic, and trying not to fall in love is a lot for anyone, but Sarah is about to discover that she doesn't have to do it alone, and the weird, wonderful family she's made might be the best magic of all. This one is just a cozy, romantic fantasy that I can't wait to read. I really love Sangu Mandana's writing style and storytelling, because not only is it so magical, but she intertwines a lot of self-improvement and finding yourself within the characters, and also adds that importance of having a family and a support system wherever you go, and she just weaves it in really well, and I can't wait to read this book. This last romance is Sounds Like Love by Ashley Poston, which comes out June 17th. Joni Lark is living the dreams. She's one of the most coveted songwriters in LA, and she can't seem to write. There's an emptiness inside of her. Nothing seems to fill it. When she returns to her hometown in Vienna, North Carolina, she hopes that the sand, the surf, and the concerts at the Revelry, her family's music venue, will spark her inspiration. But when she gets there, nothing is how she left it. Her best friend is avoiding her, her mother's memories are fading fast, and the Revelry is closing. How could she think about writing her next song when everything is changing without her? Until she hears it. A melody in her head, lyricless and half-formed, and an alluring and addictive voice to go with it, belonging apparently to a wry musician with hang-ups of his own. Surely he's a figment of her overworked imagination, right? But then he's a very real attached to the voice shows up in Vienna. He's aggravating and gruff on the outside. Nothing like the sweet, funny voice in Joni's head, and he has a something. The sentence just ended right here. He has something. They'll finish the song haunting them both, break their connections, and hope that they don't risk their hearts in the process. Ashley Poston is the queen of romantic magical realisms, and I think that's what we're getting with the music that Joni and the voice that Joni is hearing in her head. It kind of is reminding me a lot of the Dead Romantics, and maybe it's because I recently just read the Dead Romantics while I'm filming this. In Dead Romantics, our main character can see and communicate with ghosts. Right here in Sounds Like Love, it sounds like she can hear someone else, and there's like that magical connection between them. This should be interesting. I like that Ashley Poston can write about whatever in the most unique ways. We have Dead Romantics, which is a ghost story. We have The 7 Year Slip, which is kind of like a time travel story. And then we have a novel love story that is more of getting sucked into your favorite book. So it's fun that we're adding a musical storyline to her backlog, front log, her book log, her reading log. This next category is fiction/historical fiction. I have 8 books on here that I want to read before the end of 2025. The first one being Babylonia by Costanza Casati. This book comes out January 14th. I read Clytemnestra and I loved it. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. And as soon as I saw that she was coming out with another book, I said that I need to read it. And funny enough, I requested to read an ARC on NetGalley and I got approved. So I do have the ARC and hopefully I will read it before the book releases so I can give you my thoughts on it. Let's talk about what the book is about though. It says, when kings fall, queens rise. Automatic, yes. Nothing about Semirami's upbringings could have foretold her legacy or the power she would come to wield. A female ruler, once an orphan raised on the outskirts of an empire, certainly no one in ancient Assyria would bend to her command willingly. Semiramis was a woman who knew if she wanted power, she would have to claim it. I love that about her. There are whispers of her fame in Mesopotamian myth. Interesting. I have not learned anything about Mesopotamia since 6th grade social studies. Semiramis, I'm saying her name way wrong, was a queen, an ambitious warrior, a commander whose reputation reaches the majestic proportions of Alexander the Great. Historical record, on the other hand, falls eerily quiet. Of course this happens when we're talking about a powerful woman and no one ever remembers. In her second novel, Costanza Casati brilliantly weaves myth and ancient history together to give Semiramis a voice, charting her captivating ascent to the throne no one promised her. I cannot wait to read this book. This is going to be really good. I am thinking 5 out of 5. I'm saying it right here. I bet this is going to be a 5 out of 5 for me. The next book is We Do Not Part by Han Kang. This book comes out January 21st. Wow. Full circle, it seems like. I read one of Han Kang's books this past year, The Vegetarian, and I did not like it at all. And I think it's because maybe I just didn't understand the point. I don't know. We are not talking about that book anymore, but I'm going to give Han Kang another chance. And this book by her sounds very interesting, which is why I added it to my 25 of 2025. One winter morning, Kyunga receives an urgent message from her friend Inseon to visit her hospital in Seoul. Inseon has injured herself in an accident and she begs Kyunga to return to Jeju Island where she lives to save her beloved pet, a white bird called Amma. A snowstorm hits the islands. When Kyunga arrives, she must reach in Sion's house at all costs, but the icy wind and squalls slow her down as the night begins to fall. She wonders if she will arrive in time to save the animal or even survive the terrible cold that envelops her and every step. Lost in the world of snow, she doesn't yet suspect the vertiginous plunge into the darkness that awaits her at her friend's house. Blurring the boundaries between dream and reality, We Do Not Part powerfully illuminates the forgotten chapters in Korean history, buried for decades, bringing to light the lost voices of their past to save them from oblivion. This sounds really interesting from a Korean historical perspective, but also the dream and reality aspect of it. It also seems like it's going to be a little horror-y as well. So really interested. I'm going to give Han Kang another chance. So we will see when I read this book what I think. This next book is Let's Call Her Barbie by Renee Rosen. This book also comes out on January 21st. She was only 11.5 inches tall, but she would change the world. Barbie is born into a new, bold novel by U.S. Today bestseller author Renee Rosen. I've never heard of Renee Rosen, so not sure if she's a bestseller for me. We'll find out. When Ruth Handler walks into the bedroom of a toy company she co-founded and pitches her idea for a doll unlike any other, she knows what she's setting in motion and might just take the world a moment to catch up. In 1956, the only dolls on the market for little girls let them pretend to be mothers. Ruth's vision for a doll shaped like a grown woman and outfitted in an enviable wardrobe will let them dream they can be anything. As Ruth assembles her team of creative rebels, head engineer Jack Ryan, who hides his deepest secrets behind his genius, and designer Charlotte Johnson and Stevie Klein, whose hopes and dreams rest on the success of Barbie's fashion. She knows they'll work against a ticking clock to get the wild idea off of the ground. In the decades to come, through soaring heights and devastating personal lows, public scandals, and private tensions, each of them will have to decide how tightly to hold on to their creation. Because Barbie has never been just a doll, she is a legacy. It's so interesting because I grew up playing Barbie all the time. Barbie dolls, Barbie this, Barbie that. Barbie's turned into Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen for me. And last year watching Barbie, this historical fiction story is going to really bring it all together. This next book is All the Other Mothers Hate Me by Sarah Harmon. This book comes out March 11th. This is a Florence Grimes, age 31, always takes the easy way out, single, broke, and unfulfilled after the humiliating end to her girl band career. She has only one reason to get out of bed each day, her 10-year-old son, Dylan. But then Alfie Risby, her son's bully and the heir to a vast frozen food empire, mysteriously vanishes during a class trip, and Dylan becomes the prime suspect. Florence, for once, is faced with a task she can't quit. She's got to find Alfie and clear her son's name or risk losing Dylan forever. Never mind that she has no useful skills, let alone investigative ones, and that all the other school moms hate her. Oh, and she's the reason to suspect Dylan might not be as innocent as she'd like to believe. This seems like it's going to be humorous, but also add that mystery element to it. I think our main character, Florence, is going to be really quirky, and I'm going to really enjoy reading from her perspective. I just thought this would be a fun fiction to read, and also the cover is really fun. This next book is The Goddess Complex by Sanjana Sathian. This book comes out March 11th. Sanjana is trying to recover her life. It's been a year since she's walked out on her husband, a struggling actor named Killian, at a commune in India after a disagreement about whether to have children. Now Sanjana is struggling to resurrect her busted anthropology dissertation and crashing at her annoyingly perfect sisters, while her similarly well-adjusted peers obsess over marriages, mortgages, and motherhood. Sanjana needs to move forward and will finalize her divorce ASAP. There's just one problem. Killian is missing. As Sanjana tries to track him down, she's bombarded with unnerving calls from women seeking her advice on pregnancy and fertility. Soon, Sanjana comes face to face, literally, with what her life might have been if she'd chosen parenthood. And the road not taken turns out to be wilder, stranger, and more tempting than she'd imagined. This seems like a really dark and funny novel about parenting and pregnancy, but also from the other perspective about a main character who might not necessarily want to be a parent or get pregnant. I think that this is going to be a really powerful story, especially for me as I am getting older and at that 30 stage of life where you're expected to have children and you're expected to be a mother, and what that means to not just me but to women in general. I think this is going to be a really powerful novel, and I can't wait to read it. I don't know why I'm saying I can't wait to read it after every book, because obviously I chose all of these books and I can't wait to read all of these books. This next book is The Antidote by Karen Russell. This book comes out March 11th. The Antidote opens on Black Sunday as a historic dust storm ravages the fictional town of Ooze, Nebraska. But Ooze is already collapsing, not just under the weight of the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl drought, but beneath its own violent histories. The Antidote follows a prairie witch whose body serves as a bank vault for people's memories and secrets, a Polish wheat farmer who learns how quickly a hoarded blessing can become a curse, his orphan niece, a basketball star and a witch's apprentice in a furious flight from her grief, a voluble scarecrow, and a New Deal photographer whose time-traveling camera threatens to reveal both the town's secrets and its fate. This just seems like a very confusing synopsis. I'm not gonna lie, but I don't really read much historical fiction, and so I think that this is going to be a really interesting take on this with the fantasy witchy element and this like suspense and unease to it. Second to last book for fiction, historical fiction, is Early 30s by Josh Dubuff. This book comes out March 18th. It says, sometimes friendships can be its own love story. Victor and Zoe are getting old. Well, older, and it's beginning to be a real problem. Best friends since college, they have been through thick and thin, poor and poorer, drunk and drunker throughout their 20s in New York. Victor has built a successful career writing celebrity profiles for one of his last glossy magazines left standing, and Zoe is working for a fashion startup that is desperately trying to figure out how to monetize influencers, but has definitely figured out how to create a toxic work culture. But their wild 20s, where mistakes can be forgiven and hangovers last until the first bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich is now replaced with responsibility, deadlines, and regrets a greasy breakfast can't cure. Story of my life with my 30s. Victor and Zoe both want something more, and when tragedy befalls Victor, their once unbreakable bond is starting to show cracks. No! They begin to leave each other on red in constant text threads and push away what they might feel be the only true love of their lives. No, this makes me sad. It's supposed to be a hilarious, heartbreaking story about coming of age, finding yourself, and maybe realizing that growing up has just as much to do with the person you were as it does with the person you are struggling to become. I am excited because it's going to be a romance book, but also it's going to add that real life element to it. I think that our characters are both going to be characters that have flaws and they're just trying to get by, as am I, and it's going to be relatable. We shall see. This last book is called Happiness and Love by Zoe Dubno. This comes out September 25th. Years after escaping New York in the center of its own artistic world, a group of self-important, depraved, and unscrupulous artists, curators, and hangers-on, our narrator is back in town with no plans to see anyone she once knew. She's wandering around the Lower East Side, thinking about the recent death of her former best friend Rebecca, when she runs into Eugene, one half of an artist-curator couple at the heart of an old social set. Despite her better judgment, she accepts his invitation to a dinner party, and though this dinner party is held only hours after Rebecca's funeral, it is not a memorial of Rebecca, but a dinner held in honor of a young, newly famous actress who's lately delays the party by hours. Lateness delays the party by hours. As the guests sip their natural wine and await the actress's arrival, the narrator, from her perch on the corner seat of a white sofa, silently and systematically and mercilessly eviscerates them, their manners, their relationships, their delusions and failures, and the complete moral poverty that brings them here to Nicole and Eugene's loft on the Bowery. When the guest of honor finally does arrive, she sets in motion of disastrous ends to the evening, laying bare and depravity, and decadence of the host's empty little lives, a hollowness that the narrator herself knows too well. That was a very confusing synopsis as well. Maybe it was how I read this, but the very top, it says this is going to be a debut novel about materialism, self-obsession, and the empty careerism of so-called cultural elites. I don't know. It sounded interesting at the time when I put this together. It still sounds interesting, but I also don't know what to expect or what I'm going to read, but we're just going to read it. This next genre is nonfiction, and I only have one book. It sounds interesting, though. It is Love Queenie, Merle Oberon, Hollywood's first South Asian star by Mayuk Sen. This book comes out March 4th. Merle Oberon attained Hollywood immortality with a nomination for the Best Leading Actress Oscar for her role in the 1936 film The Dark Angel. It was the first time a performance of color had received an acting nomination at the Academy Awards. But because Oberon concealed her South Asian identity throughout her lifetime and passed for white, very few people knew. In Love Queenie, the first biography in more than 40 years of an India-born actress, Mayuk Sen draws on family interviews and previously untapped archival research to animate the Wuthering Heights star. Hard-won journey to fame. From an upbringing in poverty, she rose to the highest echelons of the film world elite during Hollywood's racially exclusionary. I love listening to autobiographies and biographies in general, and I think that this is going to be something that I'm really going to love. This is the first that I've ever heard of her, and it's so cool that she was the leading actress Oscar in 1936 for her film. I am so glad that someone's writing a story about her, and you've heard it before. I can't wait to read it. This next genre is fantasy, and I have 6 books. A lot of these are sequels or third books in series or final books in series. So I'm not going to give you a synopsis because I don't want to spoil anything for you, but I'm still going to mention the books. The first one is Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. This is the 3rd book in the Empyrean trilogy or series. I think that there's only 3. Unsure, there might be more. So instead of trilogy, I'll say the 3rd book in the series. This comes out January 21st. Cursebound by Sarah L. Arifi. This book comes out on February 18th, and this is the 2nd book in the Fable series. The first one is called Fable, and this is a sequel. I actually got accepted to read the digital arc of this book, so I'm hoping to read this before February 18th comes out so I can give you all a review. Oathbound by Tracy Dion. This is the 3rd book in the Legend Born cycle, which comes out on March 4th. Highly recommend that you read books 1 and 2. This series is absolutely brilliant. It is technically a YA fantasy, but I don't think that it reads YA at all. It is a dark academia with a little bit of romance and a lot of plot, and the magic system is so fascinating, and it revolves around the Knights of the Round Table and King Arthur. Sounds all wild, and it's so perfectly wild. It's so good. This next one is The Knight and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. This is the 1st book in the Stonewater Kingdom. This book comes out on May 20th. Sybil has spent 9 years dreaming of having no dreams at all. Like the other founding girls who traded a decade of service for a home in the great cathedral, Sybil is a diviner. In her dreams, she receives visions from 6 unearthly figures known as omens. From them, she can predict terrible things before they occur, and lords and common folk alike travel across the kingdoms of Troms as windswept moors to learn their futures by her dreams. Just as she and her sister diviners near the end of their service, a mysterious knight arrives at the cathedral. Rude, heretical, and devilishly handsome, the knight Roderick has no respect for Sybil's visions. But when Sybil's fellow diviners begin to vanish one by one, she has no choice but to seek his help in finding them. For the world outside of Cathedral's cloister is wrought with peril. Only the gods have answers she is seeking, and as much as she'd rather avoid Roderick's dark eyes and sharp tongue, only a heretic can defeat a god. I love Rachel Gillig's writing style. I think she does a great descriptive job, but also her magic systems are so unique and she just brings everything to life. So I cannot wait to read this new fantasy. Bury Our Bones in Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. This book comes out on June 25th. There's not much that says about this story. It says Santo Domingo de la Calzada, 1532, London, 1837, Boston, 2019. 3 young women, their bodies planted in the same soil, their stories tangling like roots. One grows high, one grows deep, and one grows wild. All of them grow teeth. Cool. That's all it says, but cool. I loved The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I gave it a 5 out of 5. This is obviously very different from that type of story, but I think this is going to either have like werewolves or vampires or some monstrous creature, and it sounds really good. Oh, the genre says vampires, so it's going to be a vampire novel. Can't wait. Catabasis, noun, ancient Greek. The story of a hero's descent to the underworld. 2 academic rivals from Cambridge must travel to hell to rescue the soul of their advisor. Getting there was easy. Surviving it and each other is another story. That's all it says, and the cover is just red and gold. We made it to the last genre. I only have 3 books for thriller/horror. The first one being Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. This book comes out January 14th. So many books in January that I want to read. There's no power in a book. They call themselves wayward girls, loose girls, girls who grow up too fast, and they're sent to Wellwood home in St. Augustine, Florida, where unwed mothers are hidden by their families to have their babies in secret, given them up for adoption, and most important of life, to forget any of it will ever happen. Okay, I love St. Augustine, Florida. One of my best friends who I've known since high school live in St. Augustine, Florida. I visited twice. I went there for my bachelorette party, actually, so that would be 3 times. It's a fun little town, and actually St. Augustine is the oldest town in the US. Love that it's taking place in a city place that I've been before. 15-year-old Fern arrives at the home in the sweltering summer of 1970, pregnant, terrified, and alone. Under the watchful eye of the stern Miss Wellwood, she meets a dozen other girls in the same predicament. There's Rose, a hippie who insists she's going to find a way to keep her baby and escape to a commune, and Zinnia, a budding musician who knows she's going to go home and marry her baby's father. And Holly, a wisp of a girl barely 14, mute and pregnant by no one knows who. Everything the girls eat, every moment that their waking day, and everything that they're allowed to talk about is strictly controlled by adults who claim they know what's best for them. Then Fern meets a librarian who gives her an occult book about witchcraft, and power is in the hands of the girls for the first time in their lives. I might have to save this for October, since this is a book that is solely about witchcraft and witches. I think that this is going to be very fun. This author cannot be tamed. This next book is The Crash by Frida McFadden. It comes out January 15th. I love listening to her books as audiobooks. I don't know why. I think that they're really fast-paced and easy to understand and just really good books to read and listen to while you're multitasking. Let's talk about what this book is about, though. The nightmare she's running from is nothing compared to where she's headed. Tegan is 18 months pregnant, alone, and desperately wants to put her crumbling life in the rearview mirror. So she hits the road, planning to stay with her brother until she can figure out what the next move is. But she doesn't realize she's heading straight into a blizzard. She never arrives at her destination. Stranded in rural Maine with a dead car and a broken ankle, Tegan worries she made a terrible mistake. Oh my gosh, I am so scared for Tegan already. Then a miracle happens when she is rescued by a couple who offers her a room in their warm cabin until the snow clears. We know you can't trust strangers in Frida McFadden's books. But something isn't right. Tegan believes that she was waiting out the storm, but as time ticks by, she comes to realize that she is in grave danger. The safe haven isn't what she thought it was, and staying there might be the most deadly mistake yet. And now she must do whatever it takes to save herself and her unborn child. Ooh, this sounds really good. Also, I hate the cold. I hate blizzards. I cannot imagine being in Tegan's position. I don't want to imagine it at all. No, no thank you. We've made it. We made it to the last book. It is The Unworthy by Augustina Basterica and Sarah Moses as a translator. This book comes out on March 4th. From her cell in a mysterious convent, a woman writes the story of her life in whatever she can find, discarded ink, dirt, and even in her own blood. Ugh. A lower member of the sacred sisterhood deemed an unworthy, she dreams of ascending to the ranks of the enlightened at the center of the convent and of pleasing the foreboding superior sister. Outside, the world is plagued by catastrophe, cities are submerged underwater, electricity and the internet are non-existent, and bands of survivors fight and forage in the cruel, barren landscape. Inside, the narrator is controlled, punished, and safe. But when a stranger makes a way past the convent walls, joining the ranks of the unworthy, she forces the narrator to consider her long-buried past and what she might be overlooking about the enlightened. As the two women grow close, the narrator is increasingly haunted by the questions about her own past, the environmental future, and her present life itself inside the convent. How did she get to the sacred sisterhood? Why can't she remember her life before? And what really happens when a woman is chosen as one of the enlightened? This book sounds dope. I just said that. I can't believe I just said that. This sounds like it's a story about climate change and a dystopian setting of some sort. It's kind of giving me Handmaid's Tale vibes, and it sounds really good. Also, I'm glad that it is a work of translation as well. If you made it this far, thank you so much. Those are my 25 books that I want to read in 2025. Those are the books that I'm going to make sure that I finish before the end of the year. And I did not hold myself accountable for 2024, but I'm going to in 2025. I can't wait. Let me know what books you're most interested in reading in the next year. And if any of the books that I talked about that you are interested in reading, let me know in the comments down below as well. And if you want to buddy read it, we can buddy read them together. That would be really fun. Just like that, I will see you in another video. Bye.